Great. Oh, thanks, Sid, again. Yeah, I definitely have some questions. I'd love to ask you about, remote working, and it looks like you guys are definitely the world leading sort of software company on it. So one of the questions I have is, I read the remote manifesto. It's very clean, very clear. But can you talk a little bit about the difference between, let's say, a global development team versus working remotely? To me, I'm not sure what are the major differences in your mind, because there's definitely, global development teams in the past, right? But now it's very,
Yeah.
very different. So love to hear
Yeah.
from
I
you.
think if you have global development teams, it tends to be that the team you directly work with is in the same office as you. Like
Yep.
you'd have 50 people in India, 50 people on the East Coast, 50 people on the West Coast of the US, something like that. And that means that a lot of the social interaction that you have day to day is still in person. If you go all remote, your team members, maybe there's some optimization for time zone, but they're not likely to be in the same town. And even if they're in the same town, you're probably only going to see them once a month or something like that when you do a meetup. So suddenly that goes away. So it's much more important to organize informal communication. So it's more important to explicitly kind of form connections in the company. And I can talk a bit about how you can do that, but I think that's a big difference. What you also tend to have is that these different global locations form their own culture. And frequently you hear people say, yes, we're one company, but like the HQ has a certain culture to it, and then the Amsterdam office has a certain culture to it. With an all remote company, you're trying to create one culture, because otherwise it's the culture of the home that the people live in. That's fine, they can bring that to work too, like they're a person, but like you do want to create a culture. So we at GitLab, we've defined 20 ways in which to kind of formalize or organize informal communication, and we've written 17 ways in which we reinforce our values, which are our culture.
Yeah, I don't know the origin story of GitLab, but I'm curious, did you start off all 100% remote from the very beginning, or you also had to face a challenge, which I think a lot of companies are facing today, right? Which is you do have these either one development or even global development teams that's transitioning to 100% remote. And some of the best practices, like learn how to do asynchronous communication, write everything down, versus on-the-job training, right? Which is very, very different from habitual habit changes. So did GitLab have to go through that transition? If you did, I'd love to hear how that has happened. If you haven't, I'd love to hear maybe through other companies you guys have spoken with on, some of the best way to change that habit, because I think it's really, really hard, right? Try instead of just to go to a meeting, talk to somebody and be able to build something very fast with almost full understanding, to, man, we have to write everything down in details so somebody remotely can read and understand without actually being there.
Yeah, it's a great question. We never made that transition. We did have an office at one time, but it was always a very small part of the company. So we never made it. Even though we never had to transition, even then, it takes a lot of effort to reinforce all these things. I will constantly remind people to work handbook first, for example. If you change something, change it in the handbook before you communicate it. Like, the change in the handbook is what you'll communicate. That is not intuitive to people, and people who have been at GitLab for years, even at the highest level, sometimes get that wrong. Even I myself sometimes get that wrong. So it is extremely hard to do it, and it needs constant reinforcements, and it needs very repeating, like handbook first. Most people at GitLab will be familiar with that. Doesn't mean they'll automatically.
So handbook is like what your internal wiki that captures all the processes and requirements. Yeah. Okay. Got it. Very, very cool. And then how about like, collaboration time frame, right? So one of the things for a global or distributed company is really, as you mentioned about time zone. So when we have people in different time zone working on different schedules, in my previous startups, the way I tell people is like, you actually just work 24/7, right? People around the world is at their own time zone, and the goal is to really connect and work together, although you have the flexibility to really control a lot of your own schedule too. So you're both 24/7 on, but you also have freedom of how you want to organize your time. So how have GitLab handled projects where it spans people in multiple time zones? Like what are some of the best practices to make that happen?
Yeah. A few things like, hey, work asynchronously as much as you can. Also make changes as small as you can. So one of our most important values is iteration. It means like reduce the scope so you can ship it earlier. And the smaller the thing you ship, the less coordination you need.
Totally.
If you're going to ship half a year's of work, you need to coordinate with everyone to make sure it's pointing in the right direction. If you're going to ship 2 weeks of work, you could be off by 90 degrees. It doesn't matter. You can fix that in the next iteration. So I think reduce coordination costs by shipping smaller things. That's the second thing. The third thing would be like prevent collaboration across time zones. So in engineering, for example, the engineering teams tend to be continent specific so that you don't have a team with people in Europe and the US if that's possible. Fourth, there is some overlap between kind of US and Europe, and use that time wisely. And fifth, try to accommodate people. It should be okay for people to speak up, like, hey, look, that's the time I need to pick my kids up. That's in the evening, and I don't work in the evening. Like if I hear a leader at our company say work 24/7, they'd have a big problem, because that's not the tone we're trying to set.
Yep.
And then I think Asia Pacific has been the hardest, because it's not in that sweet spot between Europe and the US. So for example, for big company announcements, we do a first or second call just for that. So in my case, my evening, I'll make time available to do an AMA with the people there to talk through what was announced.
Yeah, that's a very good point, because one of the previous best practice I had is, you do have a morning announcement for US East Coast with Europe, and then maybe like a late evening of the same announcement for Asia. Because this way you do have the real-time interaction, right? In addition to just send an announcement and do a video or something
we
like
would
that.
work async. So the announcement would land at the same point for everyone, and it would be written or a video. It would be asynchronous. Everyone would consume that. And then the interaction sessions would be structured as AMAs, like just ask me anything about anything. And then mostly, but there's just been this announcement. So I totally understand if a lot of questions are about that.
Totally. And then I'm looking at the right process down over on the job training. So I think one of the hardest part for let's say a more traditional or grouping to change this is that there's so much stuff that's unwritten, right? How do you set up? So have you heard from other companies like how to make that happen, right? Because for Flexport, we went super fast for I think the first 6 years. Pretty small team, one location, and there's a lot of things we learned to set up everything. And then now, our team got to be pretty big, and we're still going to grow, by probably another 50% on the engineering side. Getting all that stuff written down and make it consistent is very, very hard. So that's sort of something we're working on right now. So I'm curious if there's a sort of interesting tidbits you have heard from other companies that have helped, or you just really just have to say, you know what, you have to do it and put a skunk team together. So.
Well, generally people will display the behavior that you incentivize. So if you give bonuses with like, you got this bonus because you documented this process and people really appreciated it. If you promote people because like, yeah, you've done the same work as everyone else, but you documented it, so it was applicable to others. even in our onboarding, there's one item where you have to make a change to the handbook. Otherwise, you cannot complete your onboarding, to set that tone very early.
Got it. Very, very cool. And then how about, when you talk about distribution of work, by continent? So can you give some examples of what do you mean by that? Is it by application, or is it by the different tech stacks, or is it by, like how do you segment the type of work?
Yeah. You get only one opportunity to kind of one way to segment your company. Like otherwise you get matrix structures, which I'm not a fan of. And your CTO, so I'll go into our segmentation that we use. It's a functional segmentation. And I think that's not expressed here. So shadows, maybe that's something we can add to this page, that we segment by functionality. These are the different levels in that. And maybe I'll skip to a random one, but we have a create stage. There's one product manager. I don't know, product management. Like everything else, shadows here is a title. And this is like, I think James probably maybe a group product manager or something. I can't tell based on this thing. It just says product management, James. So I think it should have a title. There's a handbook link of what this stage does. And then here's the list of all the names. And here are like the capabilities they're responsible for. So that's how we organize. And those capabilities, if you go to the homepage, these are all our kind of marketing ready capabilities. We have some capabilities that are not like features we advertise, we sell, but that are kind of supporting features. Those you'd only find on this page I just showed.
So then in terms of recruiting, hiring people into GitLab, then do you have that expectation up front? Like, hey, in Europe, these are the things you guys, the team over there will be working on. If you're in US, it'll be this. If you're in Asia, it'll be this. Like how, you're right? Like, so essentially the type of work or project is different.
No, we're not that strict, and we don't differentiate. I don't think there's another type of work happening in Europe than in the US.
Yeah.
And we have teams that span both continents. Like we try to make it one continent. It's just more time overlap, easier to get feedback, but it's not a must for us.
Got it. So it's just more like a guideline, right? Try as much as possible. But then if somebody in one area is really, really interested in certain type of work, and if it works out, you let it happen. Very, very cool. So on the technical side, a little bit less about remote working. I'm curious about sort of how do you guys set up your infrastructure to support, development teams around the world? Is it all in one data center or multiple data centers? Is it like how do you guys set up your
so with GitLab, you can host it on one location. If bandwidth is a problem, you can have GitLab geo instances that are in different countries and that are synced up. So like, for example, I think in India, sometimes bandwidth, just cloning repositories is a problem, and the product supports that if you want. But generally, it's running from a single cloud data center or normal data center.
And then the other thing I thought about is right, I think it's great, everybody's working asynchronously. Then do you have an opinion around sort of the agile development manifesto and sort of stand-ups and stuff like that, right? Because if everybody's distributed in different time zone, one of the challenge for us, I'm pretty sure many other companies, is that you have daily stand-ups, you have the bi-weekly sprint reviews, demos, and then you have your backlog grooming. Like, do you also have a flavor of that's synchronously, or those are things you guys are doing, or actually just not doing because it doesn't work? In this environment?
I think it doesn't work. I think it's not something that lends itself to working remote. I think, look, there's two things to kind of these stand-ups. Like making sure that everyone is being productive. There's a bit of a tech accident, even though they don't say it like, oh, it's only for problems, but then really like it totally, I've seen every time it is integrated in something else. In GitLab, you have productivity analytics, and it allows you to see like how many merge requests, how many issue comments. And then you can, if you want to check like the quality of that work, you can click down. But very frequently, it's just helpful to know, like if someone hasn't done anything for a day, either they're not feeling well, you should reach out because to wish them well, or they're totally blocked on something. And I think as for blockers, like I really hope people don't wait for the stand-up to tell someone they're stuck. Like, look, we have Slack channels, just drop a line in there.
Yep.
If you're stuck on something, ask for help. And we call that, I think David Hansen coined it, but manager of one. Like we expect people to manage themselves, and that they don't need a daily meeting with a manager to tell if there's something stuck. Like they are responsible. For example, we also don't have project managers.
Yep.
The engineers have to do it together, and if it doesn't happen, we think that there's a problem. There's apparently no managers of one, but we're not going to have someone kind of ask you what should be done and then tell you to do it. And that seems like a necessary process. As for demos, I think demos are amazing. I don't think they should be in a meeting. So in GitLab, we have review apps. So if you just want to click through the application as it proposed, great, you can do that. We use YouTube a lot, where people upload videos like, hey, this is what I made. That is great. There's lots of ways to do it that are not a meeting. You don't need to all be in this at the same time to do that. Yep. You can leave suggestions on the merge request, or use the visual review capabilities of GitLab.
Okay. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. But then does this mean you don't really have project that depends on client delivery? So, for Flexport, even though we're a software technology provider, right, we do need to integrate with client systems and supplier systems. So there is collaboration with people where you do need to make certain deadlines versus otherwise. I think, if we're doing software.
We have super strict deadlines. We ship every month on the 22nd, and you're not allowed to span multiple sprints. So you have to ship it in that sprint.
Got it. So break it down to small enough, and then make sure that each person is accountable for their delivery and
for the delivery of them as a group.
Yeah. Got it. Very, very cool.
And then with external parties, I think it is pretty meeting heavy, because that other organization is used to working like that. So don't think you can use like your way of working with another organization. Kind of into lots of synchronous meetings to make it happen. And the same thing if something at GitLab is urgent or important, it might also degrade into something meeting heavy.
Got it. Yeah, for sure. Just like any service type of company, like, we really try to adopt ourselves to how the client works to make sure it really fits their style. So, but internally, we should have our own best practices and stuff like that. Just one general question, with all the different companies who uses GitLab are working for remote more and more, like, are there features you developed to address that? I'm a little bit curious. Did your product roadmap change, or because of what's happened, or pretty much
everyone keeps trying to make remote software or something? It's not needed. The people made it. Like GitLab works great remote, Slack works great, Zoom works great, Google Docs works great. I think just use the software appropriately. And for example, in meetings, like we have an entire page on how we use Google Docs in meetings, and we're way more effective at that than any other company. So it's not necessarily about the tools. It's about how you use them. But for example, like the productivity analytics I just showed, that was because like people got stuck, new people, they were not used to speaking up, and then you want to be able to detect that quicker.
Got it. So so one last question. It looks like all these best practices you guys have put together over time. Like, how do you go about like, I guess, improving it, right? Like, and I'm assuming it's more of like a natural process where you assume the handbook is the truth, and anybody who have suggestions can go modify it. Or do you have a committee that says, you know what, this is a big problem, we really have to go after it, and then make sure there is again, like a ninja team or skunkwork team that really drives it? Or is it just more like natural inertia, and you just trying to find the right champion naturally, of balance between like organize push versus sort of self-organize?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Different problems call for different things. If it's, I don't know, a new engineering title, that's has a lot of aspects to it. It's like almost a committee working on that with meetings and everything. But most changes are just someone had a good idea, they proposed it, and it gets approved.
Great.
And it's all like via merge requests in GitLab.
Excellent.
And I can show you like the speed of iteration. This is what's happened in the last hour in handbook.
Awesome. And then once the change happens, I'm assuming people subscribe to different locations, so they'll see the change. Or
we've never been able to make that work. So it's like decide on the change based on the change how you communicate it.
I guess so. The owner will take
the changes. You never need to communicate them because you want to make small changes, right? So most are small. Some changes you just see some people in the
and hopefully it'll
commit
go
in GitLab. But some you post in a Slack channel, they get into a presentation, etc.
Time check, we're at time.
Okay.
Thanks, Charlie.
Yeah, very cool. So, thank you for your time. This has been very helpful to get some of the insights from you and